A vial of insulin costs an upward of US $332 when the same amount went for just $21 a couple of decades ago. This is an increase of over 1,000%. Get this, the cost of making insulin for one person for an entire year is just between $78 and $133. This is just too high of a profit and too high of a price for any American. To get the full picture of the unreasonable prices of drugs in the United States, let's compare the same amount of a vial of insulin in a few countries. A vial of Novolog that costs up to $300 in the US only goes for $48 in Singapore and just $6 in Austria. With a special focus on insulin, let's discuss why giant companies are taking advantage of vulnerable populations while making gigantic profits. How do pharmaceutical companies succeed in setting high drug prices without any regulatory consequences? In a free market, the prices of commodities are determined by the forces of demand and supply. However, the pharmaceutical industry is not a free market because only very few players control the market. The industry of drug medications is controlled by a few giant companies that act as some sort of a monopoly. This means they can set any price per unit as they wish. The giant companies take advantage of the barriers to market entry and drug importation, such as legal and regulatory constraints. With little or no competition, the pricing of a vial of insulin, for example, is only determined by the drug manufacturers with a focus on revenue. When companies set the prices of the much-needed drugs at any price they deem fit, the consumer suffers because the prices are likely to be unaffordable. So why is drug pricing a problem? Insulin is a drug whose prices do not make any sense. One reason is that the drug has been on the market for over a century, meaning production and pricing should have stabilized. Any research and development should have produced only lower drug prices than more expensive insulin types. Again, pricing is not dictated by the free market but rather by monopolistic pharmaceutical companies. And even if inflation was to cause an increase in insulin prices, the rate of increase in the last 2 decades does not match inflationary adjustments. Insulin and other daily needed drugs are life-saving medications without which many people will not survive. Millions of vulnerable consumers need insulin to survive. Yet, the giant pharmaceutical companies continue to benefit from insulin drugs at the expense of the vulnerable populations. Insurance for many average income earners is not enough to sustain the high prices of drugs used to treat chronic illnesses such as type 2 diabetes. The high prices of drugs make it difficult for many individuals to cover the costs of medications by either insurance or cash. Some consumers are forced to ration their medication intake, something not advisable and could negatively affect their health outcomes. Here's an even better reason to wonder why insulin costs are high. Millions of public funds are poured into pharmaceutical industries for research and development and tax deduction for advertising. So far, close to $1 trillion have been used to fund drug research by the National Institutes of Health in just under a decade. These funding and incentives should translate to lower costs of medications, especially insulin, which has undergone close to 100 years of development. In addition, the federal government has been funding research and development of new drugs since 1981. So, the high costs of research and development should not be a significant reason for the country's excessively high drug prices because the government chips in. Still, the pricing strategies used by big pharmaceuticals are meant to maximize the profits reaped from the drugs. These are the 6 reasons drug prices are so high in the US. According to Vincent Rajkumar's study, these are the 5 reasons for the high insulin prices. First, there is a considerable proportion of people needing insulin to survive. Second, there are virtual monopolies that have the freedom of setting prices without regard for market forces. Third, the issue of patented drugs makes it difficult for new developments that are better to infiltrate the market. However, new patents have been emerging for new developments in insulin variants. Fourth, there are serious barriers to new entrants in the pharmaceutical industry. This means that the remaining few companies can price their drugs as they wish, given there is not much competition. Also, intermediaries also have considerable flexibility to increase prices for more profits even after the initial pricing by the drug developers. Lastly, the pharmaceutical industry has very powerful lobbyists who influence regulations in the industry. Are there solutions to the high drug prices? As you might have correctly guessed, there are ways drug prices can be managed. First, we need new regulations to manage the virtual monopolies that make unreasonable pricing. For instance, the government can demand pharmaceutical companies to base their pricing on value rather than unexplainable criteria. Other developed countries use value-based drug pricing and effective regulations to control the prices of vital drugs such as insulin. Further, the government should enact laws to facilitate and allow new players to enter the market. A simple economic principle is that many players in the market will increase competition, which could lower or maintain affordable drug prices. Another issue is that the current regulation provides a leeway for companies to rename their drugs as new generics. The problem with this behavior is that the companies can launch their own drugs as new developments and, in the process, overprice the drugs. There is an urgent need for transparency on the rebates paid to the pharmacy benefit managers to ensure value is passed down to the consumer. Most importantly, physicians should show goodwill by recommending and preferring drugs that are priced the lowest. Thank you for watching.